Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Drood. So this is going to be the Chapter 3, Section 3 additional notes. So please definitely follow along, get this written down, because remember, I might be asking for a picture of this next chapter when we are done with the test. So on Wednesday, we went over our constitutional scavenger hunt. And if you didn't get the constitutional scavenger hunt done, please get it done. I will not mark you down too harshly. I'm a pretty fair grader. I do accept late work. So please get it in. So we looked at the Constitution. We saw what are some components of it during the constitutional scavenger hunt. And even though we can't read the entire Constitution just because we just don't have enough time in the class, we can at least get a rough outline of what the Constitution looks like. So that's what the articles are. So each article discusses what its purpose is. So starting in Article 1, we get the legislative branch. It establishes the Congress. It establishes what the legislator's jobs are, what they're supposed to be doing, how they're going to do it, and so on and so forth. That's exactly what Article 1 does. Article 2 does the same thing, but for the executive branch. So it establishes the executive branch. It establishes the president and what they can do. And then third, it talks about the judicial branch and does the same as the other two, where it establishes the Supreme Court, it establishes what they can do, how they're going to do it. The first three articles of the Constitution just establishes the three branches of our government and how we're going to do things, what each branch is responsible for, and what they can and what they cannot do. So that's what the first three talk about. Article 4 discusses how states relate with each other and how the federal government will relate with the states and vice versa. So the states will no longer fight with each other. Back during the Articles of Confederation, the states would always fight with each other and they'd bicker and argue, and that's no longer going to happen. So it made it to where the states have to do it in a certain way to interact with each other, and also how they interact with the federal government. And it tells us what their powers are, how the power is going to be divided, and we have a nice, cool little visual of this I'm going to explain to you later. So keep in mind of that. But I put federalism here because this is the article. Article 4 really establishes that we are now a federalist country. We no longer are a confederacy. So we are a federalist government where some of the power is to the states, some of the power belongs to the federal government, and we're more equal, and that we share power. Article 5 discusses how we can amend or change the Constitution. We have changed our Constitution a few times before, actually right here. We've changed it 27 times. These are the changes, revisions, or additions to the Constitution. So we've done it 27 times. But we couldn't add amendments like freedom of speech or the freedom to where we ended slavery, the 13th Amendment, or where we gave women the right to vote, the 19th Amendment. We wouldn't have those amendments if it wasn't for Article 5. Article 5 gave us the opportunity to keep the Constitution updated, to keep it relevant. If we didn't have this article, we could never make a change, and eventually it would kind of fall out of favor, because how can we run a government with rules of 1789? So our founding fathers purposely said we need to create a document that's living and that it can be changed and adapted, and that is what the articles do. Article 6 has three major components to it. First, it says that all debt, either from the previous, in the past, or in the future, so anything from the Revolutionary War until now, is the responsibility of the federal government, not the state governments, but the federal government. That means the federal government is responsible and must pay all debts that the United States has accumulated. The second part of Article 6 discusses how the Constitution is now the supreme law of the land. That means no other law is above the Constitution. The Constitution is the top law. We look to the Constitution. We don't look anywhere else. And also, everyone has to follow it. It's the law of the land. That means every state has to follow what the Constitution says. No one is above the law. And lastly, the Article 6 talks about the oaths of office. So every government leader, whether it's a congressperson, the president, or a judge, must take an oath of office. They need to take an oath of office. So they have to say, I swear that I will uphold my job and that I will uphold the Constitution. And I don't know the exact words off the top of my head, but they take the oath and they say, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to make sure I'm following the law and I am doing what I can for the people. So every position has an oath. Article 6 has a lot to it, but that's what Article 6 was. And lastly, Article 7 discussed how the Constitution was ratified. So it just made it official. All that's where they signed their name on the dotted line. So they said, we made the Constitution law. It is how things are going to be run. No other way. So those are the 7 articles of the Constitution. And if you want a cool little visual, go to page 69, and there's a cool little box. It's kind of small, and it says exactly what I just said here, but it's a nice little visual for those that are visual learners. So please go to your page 69 in your book because it'll be helpful. And just a friendly reminder, uh, books, we're going to need them. We needed them for our constitutional scavenger hunt. We're going to need them more often. I'm going to be using it more. You're going to be using it more. So please, definitely get a book if you have not done so. Speaking of that, for the next part that we're going to discuss, pages 70 to 71 gives us nice visuals of all 6 principles. We talk about the 6 principles in our outline, but we're also going to discuss it here. And there's a cool little visual that will give you nice pictures of each of the 6 principles. So please look at that page as well. So in this, we gave a description. We kind of already discussed the descriptions, so I'm going to go over that briefly, but I'm going to talk about the examples. So in popular sovereignty, remember that is where the people have the power. The people have the power, not the government gives them their power. We, the people, give them their power. And we can give the power and we can take that power away. And how we do that is by voting. The most recent election was the 2020 election, and that was against Biden and Trump. And that is how we chose. And the American people spoke. And right now we have President Joe Biden. However, it wasn't just the president. We also voted for some Congress, some representatives, some senators. We also voted for judges and mayors. So this goes from the top all the way to the local elections where we can vote. And we the people, are the ones that give them their power. We could choose who we want and who we can get rid of. So that's popular sovereignty. So popular sovereignty, think voting. Limited government, remember, this is the idea that the government is not all powerful. The government does not have the power. Again, the people have the power. And we can give them the power, we could take it away, and that power is limited. They only have an X amount of power, and if they try to overstep that, we could take action. And one of the ways we do that when a leader is trying to step over the line and they're trying to get more power, we can impeach them. We can get rid of them. And some examples here is Bill Clinton, Andrew Johnson. They were impeached. Those were former presidents. They were impeached once. And Donald Trump, he made history by being the president that got impeached twice. Now, they were impeached. They had the charges brought up on them, but they were never convicted. They were never actually convicted. And you need to be convicted in order to be taken out of office. So technically, because Trump was never convicted, he could run for president again. And if he gets elected, he would be president. So in 2024, if he tries again and he gets elected, he will be president again. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. So definitely, we've had that. But again, impeachment isn't just for the president. can impeach judges, and we can also impeach representatives, Congress people. We can do that. So the government's not all powerful. And the only power they have is what the people say they can have. And if they try to step over that line, we can impeach them. Now, we talked about up at the top where I said we have three separate branches of our government. Well, we have separation of powers. Our founding fathers purposely gave us a legislative, an executive, and a judicial branch. They purposely made it to where not all the power was in the hands of one person. So the separation of powers is the idea that the power is split up evenly and each branch is responsible for their own jobs and the other branches cannot touch it. For example, the legislature or Congress is the only branch that can make the laws. They are the only branch that can make laws. The executive, so the president, is the only one that can enforce/carry out the laws. And they also have to approve laws. They have to give their signature going like, I approve of this law. And then, of course, the judicial branch, they interpret. They say, wait a minute, is this law allowed? Like, what does the law say? Also, is the law constitutional? Is the law not constitutional? So that's exactly what the separation of powers is talking about. So each branch has their power. Each branch is responsible for that power, and no other branch can take it. And our founding fathers did that because they didn't want all the power to be in one hand. Our founding fathers were afraid of one person or one group gaining all the power. Checks and balances is that idea that there's a restraint or there's a stop to power if another branch is trying to take too much power. So if one branch is trying to say, oh, I can, let's say the president's trying to say, I'm going to try to make a law. It would be Congress's responsibility to say, stop, no, that's my job. Because remember, the legislative, so Congress, is the only one that can make laws, not the president. So they would say, wait, stop. They're correcting them and making sure that they're staying in their lane. So think of when I say staying in their lane, like if you're in a car, you want someone to stay in their lane. You don't want them getting in your lane. Like you don't want them to just merge into your lane and hit you. No, you're going to say, no, you're going to honk your horn. You're going to say, no, this is my check. I'm restraining that. And one way the president can check Congress is to veto or reject a bill. So they can say no to a bill because remember, they have to approve the laws and they can veto it saying, I do not approve. I do not think this is right. Nope, you can't. But Congress can also they have a check on the president. They can say, no, I'm going to override your veto by a 3/4 majority, and we're going to say we're going to make this a law. They can override a veto, and a bill can still become a law, but uh, they have to get a majority in Congress to override it. And also, there's other checks, like again, impeaching the president. That is a check that the Congress has on the president. They can impeach them. And if you look on page 73, you will find a really cool visual that'll help you see the different checks and the different checks and balances that we have for each branch of our government. Now, the judicial branch has such a big check on the other branches. It has its own section called judicial review. This is the idea that the court can determine the constitutionality of a law or a government action. They can say that follows the Constitution. It's all right because again, they interpret the laws. But they can also say, no, you are not following the rules. You are not following the law. That is against the rules. And so the courts decide that. And the famous court case that you're going to want to know for your test is Marbury versus Madison. That's on page 76 to 77. You can read that. You're not going to get the question of what was the case about Marbury versus Madison. The only thing you need to know is that Marbury versus Madison is the court case that said the Supreme Court has the right to have judicial review. They determine if a law is constitutional or unconstitutional. If we did not have Marbury versus Madison, we would not have that today. Some examples of an example of a decision that was passed down by the court saying it was unconstitutional was Brown v. Board of Education. That was about segregation, and they said, hey, it's unconstitutional for segregation to be happening. Who cares about the color of your skin? No, it's illegal for schools to do that. So made the they made it illegal. They said, okay, it's unconstitutional, and schools had to stop segregating students based on race. So if it wasn't for Brown v. Board of Education, we'd probably still have segregation in this country. So Brown v. Board of Education was huge. And an example of a ruling where they said a ruling was constitutional was Roe v. Wade. This was about a woman who had an abortion, and that they were trying to see, well, was that constitutional? Is it unconstitutional for her to have that abortion? Is it her right? And they said there was nothing in the Constitution that said that she couldn't. So it was ruled constitutional. So it is now legal. It is constitutional to have an abortion. And then lastly, we have federalism. You can look on page 74. This will give you a little Venn diagram of the different powers of the state and the federal government. Because remember, federalism is just that idea that the states have some power and they share some with the federal government, and the federal government's a little bit more powerful by like 51%. But the states still have some rights. They still have some power, and the states have a say. And each uh, group has some power. For example, states are the ones that conduct elections. They are the ones that each state has their own elections and how they're going to run their elections. And no one state is really the same. There's some that are similar. So one state, it might be legal to have a mail-in ballot for voting, but another one, it might be illegal. It all depends on what state you're in. States are also responsible for establishing schools. So they're the ones that say, okay, this is how the school's going to be. They establish the schools that we have. So each state establishes their own school and what the rules are for those schools. Now, the federal government, they have some powers that the states cannot touch, such as declaring war or making money. Coin money is make money. States cannot just print their own money. They can't. That's illegal. That's the responsibility of the federal government. And then there's some powers that both can do. It's called shared powers, such as taxes. Both the federal and the state governments can tax you. And also, they both can establish their own courts. So states have courts, and we have our own judges and how that works. But we also have courts in the federal government, and those courts are for federal crimes. Again, there's more examples on page 74. So definitely, please take a look, jump over there, and read that. This next part, I'm not really going to cover in too much in detail, but I'm going to go over it briefly. So the preamble, just know that that's the introduction to the Constitution. So that's the introduction. It tells us like what the goals, what the ideas, what they're going to do in the Constitution. Just think of it as the introductory paragraph, just like how you have introduction to your papers in school. It's the same for the Constitution. There's an introduction. This one right here talks about why separation of powers is there, or how our founding fathers did not want them to be one branch of government to become too powerful. So our founding fathers separated the powers into three branches and gave them specific jobs that they can do. And then they said, oh, we're going to make checks and balances to make sure that they're staying in their lane. So this was all because they wanted to keep the system balanced. They wanted to make sure that not one group or one person became way too powerful. So if because we have separate branches, that means the jobs and duties are in the hands of a certain branch. And because they're responsible of it, it's impossible for another branch to grab hold of that power. So we already kind of discussed that. We're not going to go too deep into that, but that's a good one. We already talked about how the president has checks on Congress. They can veto a bill. But again, Congress can override a presidential veto by a 2/3 majority. And then lastly, we already did this, is list two powers the states have the federal government does not have. In education, conduct elections, and regulate marriage are some examples. So that's it for our section 1 additional notes. Section 2 will be covering next time on Monday and Tuesday, depending on what group you're in. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. So please, again, make sure you're getting your book. Make sure you're watching the other videos if you were absent, because I have another video on top of this one. And get those assignments in. Get any missing work in. Uh, know that I accept like work. If you need me, please message me. I have Remind. I have my email. I have my uh, Schoology messages. So I am available to you. So please get that in. Um, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.